Hi, and welcome to our panel discussion today on why diversity pays for the Ironworkers Impact Virtual Conference. My name is Scott Blair, and I'm managing editor with Engineering News Record, and I'm glad to have you all here with me today. Wanted to start out with Ariane Begovish, who is a senior research fellow with the Institute of Women's Policy Research. Ariane, could you please tell us and outline the business case on why does diversity and inclusion matter to the construction industry?
Forgive me for starting with very much a business school little chart here on the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The reason I put this up is just to show that diversity and inclusion can impact everything, from recruitment to reputation to compliance. So the other issue probably is it can affect it in a positive way. It can benefit, but also more often you figure out that it costs you dearly when you have messed up on something. So just to start a little bit with recruitment, we know that the trades are getting to a point where a lot of skilled workers are close to retirement. So getting the next generation of workers in is very important. But we also know that you are competing with a lot of other industries that seem more exciting. So getting the right workers and not letting go of them once you have them is pretty important. A few years ago, I had the privilege of interviewing Bill Brown, the co-chair of Impact, around a really innovative work that the ironworkers are doing. They're the only building trades union who have a national pre-apprenticeship program targeted at getting in women. And what he said why they're doing is it's the right thing. We don't have enough women in the industry, but also we want to make sure that we kind of keep hold of anybody that we ever get in touch with, and that we are the ones who get the women who think this is the right career for them. And this takes me to the next point, retention. You probably all know the figure, $32,000 to get an apprentice through the apprenticeship as a journey worker, journey level iron worker. So if somebody leaves, you lose those $32,000. But what's often not counted, you have to pay more overtime because now you don't have enough workers. You have to spend a lot of time to find new workers and get them into the program. And of course, you may be fined because you don't finish contracts on time. So there are lots of costs or benefits that aren't really measured, but they can really mount up. Let's go health and safety. I don't want to put women as the superwoman or heroes. Women aren't necessarily more careful or caring or more concerned with health and safety, but there is quite a bit of research that shows when women enter male-dominated fields such as ironwork, they're more careful with tools, they're more concerned about ensuring that people stay healthy, and it means your health and safety compliance and tool compliance costs go down. But maybe the most important issue in this time post-COVID is reputation. The COVID epidemic has made the inequities in the labor market in our society very clear, and there's a very high appetite for change. And as Bill Brown said already, when this was 2017, way before now, we are relying in the ironworker industry on public and private large developers and funders. And they are under pressure, they want to see diverse workforces. So if the workforce that builds the kind of public and private contracts doesn't look as the general population, it is much less likely that there will be the willingness and the funds to finance that new work. So with that, I pass back to Blair.
Mary Vogel, you're Executive Director of Building Pathways, and I was very interested to hear about your integrated supply and demand program. Could you talk a little bit about that and how it furthers the diversity and inclusion goals?
Sure, thanks, Scott. Glad to be here today. In Massachusetts, we have adopted this integrated supply demand strategy to approaching diversity in our industry. And what that means is on the supply side, making sure we have pipeline opportunities to get more women and people of color into the trades. So we have 5 building trades pre-apprenticeship programs across the state, including ours in Boston, which is the largest one and the oldest one. We work with the career tech ed programs to make sure that we're educating their female students about career opportunities in the union building trades. It always surprises us that, they're in a construction related track in their CTE program and know nothing about union apprenticeship or how to get into an apprenticeship program. So we offer conferences where we educate both the students and their advisors and educators about union apprenticeship. We also launched what we call a Build a Life campaign in Massachusetts, and that's a campaign where we're heightening the visibility of tradeswomen so that other women who are not in this industry but would like to explore the opportunities see that women are actually occupying these positions. And we do that with media. We hold monthly Tradeswomen Tuesdays where we invite career seekers to hear from tradeswomen who are doing this work about their experience in the industry. We had one of those last night with 40 attendees. So we know women are interested in these careers. On the demand side, we want to make sure that once we bring these women into the pipeline, there are opportunities for them to start work and continue to work and make a career out of this industry. And in that regard, we're working on the public policy side, making sure that the state and local hiring goals for women and people of color in these construction trades positions are actually being implemented through compliance as well as best practices, sharing best practices with contractors and the unions about how to meet these goals. And that leads me to the role of, subcontractors and unions in creating more diversity in their membership and in their workforce. One thing that we really focus on from the contractor's perspective is to make sure your core crew, those people who are with your company from job to job, is diverse from the outset. When you go to a project, you should make sure your initial workforce there is diverse, that it has women and people of color, because it's your core crew. It's that opportunity where you can really build a strong skill set to make it a career in the industry. We tell contractors, don't checkerboard. What that means is moving people from job site to job site just to meet hiring goals. We don't want that to happen because, again, they're not building their skill set. We want contractors to track their diverse workers, to make projections about what their workforce needs are, and then to track the diversity. We're hearing from our developers in our owner community that they want diversity in the construction workforce. So it really inures to the benefit of union construction to make sure that they are recruiting and retaining that diverse workforce. We have developed what's called Finishing the Job, which is a manual of best practices for all stakeholders in the industry, from the owner to the construction managers, to the subs, to the unions, to the apprenticeship programs, about how to make sure we're achieving and retaining diverse workers. And in terms of the contractor piece, we want you to make sure that you're training your chief staff, your foreman, your supervisors, and so forth in those best practices, that you're making sure that your foremen implement these best practices, not only in terms of giving, overtime opportunities, for example, to women and diverse workers, that they're well schooled in what it takes to retain that diverse workforce. Use toolbox talks to reinforce the message that everybody is welcome on the job site and that the diverse skills and qualities they bring to the workforce are actually beneficial to the industry. And then closely monitor, as I mentioned before, overtime. We noticed on the Encore Casino project in Boston that women were not getting the overtime opportunities that the men were getting, and that was corrected. So again, it's all about making sure that we're not only creating a diverse pipeline, but that we're doing everything we can to make sure they're retained. To Ariane's point, we're investing all of this money in diverse workers. We want to make sure that they stay with us forever. The other thing we would recommend to contractors is, they have a part to play in hiring diverse workers, but on the recruitment side, it's the apprenticeship programs. So really demand of your apprenticeship programs that they're bringing in a diverse applicant pool. And that means not putting an ad in the local paper, telling people that you're accepting applications, but really doing broad-based, intentional recruitment in communities of color, with women's groups, all of those places where you know that you will reach underrepresented populations. So I would say, to Ariane's point, that, we agree that it's important to do this work. You just have to be intentional about it. And in Massachusetts, we are now at 10% women apprentices in union building trades programs across the state. We've increased that percentage since 2012 by almost 30%. We have several of our apprenticeship programs that have reached 20% women apprentices, several that increased that percentage by 20% over the past year. And our goal in 2025 is 25% women apprentices in our union construction trades, whereas the non-union sector hovers around 1% to 2%. So this is a real market opportunity for union construction to increase its market share.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was great. And I think there's no better segue than to toss it over to Lamont Davis, who is a contractor, owner of Anvil Steel Engineering. Lamont, I'd love to hear some of the obstacles that exist out there for contractors to achieve diversity goals and how you overcame those, especially on the Encore project that Mary brought up.
Yes. Once again, my name is Lamont Davis, the owner of Anvil Steel and Engineering. And while I was out on the Encore project, I noticed that diversity was being a big issue that was being pushed there, and there was a group effort. So what I did is I came back to the office and I created for my foreman a checklist. And in my checklist, we went back to all the guys and women that were working for us and apprentices, and I actually had them fill out what their status actually is. Whether you're African-American male, whether you're a female, whether you're a veteran. And we found that we had some apprentices that had veteran statuses because their mother or their father were a disabled veteran, which qualified them to fall in as a veteran. And there was guys that I've worked with that were iron workers for years that I never even knew were veterans until they checked off our paperwork. And then once we were able to come back and review our paperwork, and we made it a two-part and turn it in, that's where we were able to start having our historical data as to how diverse our company was. So that was one of the things that I implemented while out on the Encore project that helped me for the third quarter between 2018 maintain a rate of 45% minorities, 7% females, and 20% veterans. And that's what we're able to maintain. I think the biggest thing for contractors to know that the future, this is the way that it is. So you might want to your own historical data as to where you sit and fit within the system. I'm currently a tier 2 contractor. Some of the larger contractors that have problems reaching these goals, I think you should reach out to some of us tier 2 contractors and we can help you succeed in those goals. Whether it's subbing out a smaller portion to a tier 2 helps a tier 1. It's the way of the future. This is the way it's going to be. So it's best to try to pair up with a smaller subcontractor and work with them, whether it's a minority-owned or woman-owned or a veteran-owned business. And you'll generally find that most of us that are smaller have been hands-on for quite some time. So we understand and see how important it is to have a complete all-around workforce.
Thank you very much, Lamont. And now I'd like to toss it over to Vicki O'Leary, General Organizer with the Ironworkers International. So Vicki, once we find and train our diverse workforce, how do we keep them from leaving the workforce? So what are the challenges and strategies to for retention?
So in the spring of 2019, we interviewed a select group of women iron workers across the USA, including apprentices to journeywomen with over 25 years experience. They were welders and rod busters and structural iron workers, white women, women of color, LGBTQ. All the women we interviewed work with the tools. And this is some of the findings that we had. We found that half the women, they felt very supported by their unions, but other half did not. And most frequently, the women ironworkers did not report the abuse that they felt that they dealt with on the job. They generally dealt with it alone. And the ironworker women were reluctant to report any issues, even ones involving worksite safety, due to not wanting to be labeled as a troublemaker, or they were kind of fearful of retaliation. And the women also generally felt that they had to fix themselves. When the women raised issues of discrimination to the union or contractors, the women were often told that they were wrong. Restroom facilities, there was issues with that. They were widespread. And nearly all the women said that their learning the skills was harder for them, not because the skill was that difficult, but because people just assumed because of their gender that they weren't going to be there that long and it wasn't worth teaching. So if they had a mentor, they felt like they could have made more strides in their career. But 100% of all the women that we surveyed said that they wanted brother ironworkers to actively support their sister ironworkers by helping show the ropes, by teaching them. And that was any form of job site training or mentoring. Ariana and Mary said that we're spending $32,000 to train one ironworker to get through their 4-year apprenticeship. We're just not using our training dollars very effectively if we're losing them. What we learned was that most of the women that left the ironworkers didn't do it because the work was too hard. They left because of the harassment and the treatment that they were receiving on the job. Bullying and harassment, they have just this dangerous domino effect, because you've got the person that's being harassed on what's coming next. The harasser is focusing on their target, and the witnesses, the people that are working around them, are totally engaged in watching what's going to happen next. Literally what you have then is safety's compromised. You've got a whole group of people that are not concentrating on the work that's on hand. And with ironwork, that focus can have a deadly consequence. Bystanders can help reduce trauma and keep ironworkers safe. And we call it SAFE with the acronym. Stop trivializing harassment and sexualized language and jokes. Avoid victim blaming. And file a report. Let a supervisor or local union leader know what's going on and what you witness. Coworkers are the best resource that we have for getting this to stop. And ensure that the aggressor understands that this bad behavior is not going to be tolerated by their coworkers.
So Vicki, I just wanted to go back to the point with harassment happening on job sites. That impacts not just the person that's being harassed, but it could affect retention of anybody on the job site. Is that correct?
It absolutely could. There's always what we consider the weakest link on the job, whether it's a man or a woman, doesn't really matter. There's always that one person that we as iron workers tend to beat on all day long. And that's the kind of stuff that's got to stop. I mean, good-natured ribbing, I guess that's okay. You just don't want to get into a point where it's illegal harassment, where it's going to not only affect the people that are around you, but affect the contractor's bottom line. We have a whole program of Be That One Guy that if would like to have this training, or if a local union would like to get this training so that their leadership is all on the same page, the apprenticeship's on the same page, we would be happy, Impact would be happy to supply this training. And that's all part of retention, because we want to keep those training dollars that we've talked about before. But another way that the iron workers have learned to retain part of our workforce is by having a paid maternity policy. The iron workers paid maternity provision policy was basically brought out because in 2016 at the Tradeswomen Build Nations conference, we had a caucus with our general president, Eric Dean. And through that, we found that a woman had worked one day too long in the rod patch and ended up having a miscarriage. And when Mr. Dean heard that, he said he felt like he'd been sucker punched in the gut. On our way out, he said, we need to figure this out. So I went to work and I found that we had this off the job accident policy, that this is something that we could dovetail off of. So how does this work? They have to have insurance through their hall. They can't use the policy in the past 24 months. So every 2 years you can use this policy. You're going to get 66% of your pay with a cap of $800 per week. And you're going to get this for 6 months prior to giving birth with an additional 6 to 8 weeks after giving birth. We think it's probably one of the best. Well, we were the first, but we're very, very flattered that now other building trades, not only flattered, good God, we need it. The tradeswomen need this. We want to keep them. They shouldn't have to choose between growing their families and work. So now we know that other building trades have done this, and it's really just amazing.
Well, I'd love to hear from Jennifer Hose. You're a journeyman with Ironworkers Local 377, and you use this program. So I'd love to hear your experience with it and how it benefited you and helped keep you in the industry.
Oh, hi. Okay, so I wanted to say thank you for having me talk today. It was a blessing that I got to use the maternity leave. The first part that was really awesome about it was the safety for for me and the child. Like, I worked until I was 5 months pregnant, and then after that, I thought, well, you know, that's probably a good time. I shouldn't be picking up heavy things, climbing ladders, stuff like that. So the maternity leave really helped out with the safety factor of it. Also, the financial part of it, knowing that I can bring in an income and not miss the income on it was really great. And then also, you know, the time off after having the baby, I was able to bond. You get about between 5 and 6 weeks, I think, off. And I was able to bond with the baby and, you know, be able to figure things out before I went back to work. It was pretty good. And I had a really good time with it. You know, it was very helpful. And I think it will help out a lot in the future with other women, because like Vicki said, there was a lady that did have a miscarriage. And I know of other women that were pregnant that just quit because they were worried about, you know, hurting their child and the income and everything like that. So it really will help in the future, and it'll help women stay in the trade, I believe. I'm very grateful that our union was the first to put that together, and I see other trades are coming in now and doing that, and that's awesome.
And Scott, I do have to tell you that we have an 83% retention rate with the women that have used the policy. That tells you right there, they're coming back to work once they've had their baby. So I can't tell you enough how great that I think this policy is, and the help that we've had for our members. And Ariane, you actually did a study on this, didn't you?
Yes, and it's really exciting to see how it has come out. And I know, you know, there are always these concerns. Everybody is suddenly going to have a baby, and we have to limit it because otherwise they're going to have 10 babies, and you know, it's going to bankrupt the the union, which of course hasn't happened. And what was interesting also, you know, talking to other unions who've followed since, it came up because women said, we cannot, you know, okay, you tell us, go out, recruit your friends, you know, tell other women. And they said, well, they can't imagine how you can be a woman and a mother in the trade. So don't even look at the trades. Having the policy, I think, has sent huge signals.
That's great. So, Ariane, I'll throw this question to you first, and then anybody else can feel free to chime in. But, you know, I know we can look at raw numbers of how many women, people of color, and other disadvantaged groups are in the construction industry, but are there any other ways we can measure success for diversity and inclusion?
You know, I think the best examples so measurement, I do think basic measurement is really important. Not least because we know what gets measured can at least raise to the surface of getting, you know, into our minds, which means enforcement, and it means also proactively helping people when they don't meet targets. And I think the work that Mary has talked about in Boston and Massachusetts and in some of the other areas, you know, holding contractors and developers accountable but with technical advice, not just saying, oh, you know, you're wrong, you're out, and you get penalized, saying, okay, we realized something didn't happen here. Let us give you some tips of how you may fix it. And I think a second aspect is what monitoring also does is show, okay, why does this foreman why does he not have a problem? And why does this one have a problem? Right? What are they doing differently? What can we learn? But we can also say, okay, you say it's impossible. I can't find a woman, or I can't find a black welder or somebody working here, or I'm losing, you know, the other issue is always, oh yeah, we've lost all the women we know because they want to have kids, right? As Vicky said, very often it's because they're being treated poorly. So monitoring does matter, and I think the basic monitoring. The other issue is to have, if you can, to have staff surveys such as Vicky did with the ironwork, so that you get people's unvarnished opinion, and you can track whether there's progress over time in the way people feel integrated in the industry.
Well, I think for me and Jen, being women ironworkers out at one time, I was out in the field by seeing other women on the job, which seems to happen a little more commonly today than what it did when I first started. There were no other women. So Jen, do you notice that you see more women on the job than you used to?
I definitely notice. When I first started out, I could count on both hands how many women were in my local. And now I think, wow, we have probably over 50. And our local is really good in that sense. We try to keep together and network together and get to know each other. I mean, there's a few that I haven't met yet, but yeah, it's gotten a lot more women in the trade, and it's awesome. It's an awesome feeling. So I can't imagine if I was from a different local that didn't have other women, you know, or as many as we do. Even with the women when I first got in, that was a lot compared to some of the locals that are now, you know, 9, 10 women. That's a lot for some of the Midwest. And so I'm lucky that I'm out of San Francisco local.
Lamont, I wanted to ask you, you know, as a business owner, subcontractors often have really tight margins that they're operating on. When something bad happens like COVID that we've just experienced or still experiencing, or an economic downturn like the Great Recession, or, you know, some kind of crisis like a natural disaster or whatever, I'm just curious, how do you still look at meeting diversity and inclusion goals while staying, you know, while trying to keep your business alive? Like, how can those two things go together?
Well, from a contractor's point of view, I mean, I think COVID has affected all of us. So what we've done up here in New England is a lot of the larger contractors have actually come out to some of the smaller guys for manpower, and we've put ourselves together in whatever projects are now currently working, whether it was my project or Daniel Mars project or Prime Steel's project or Suffolk project. We've been promoting helping one another to get through this time of need. Because there are some people with the pandemic who've actually just chosen to stay home, and rightfully so. But there are some of us out here that are choosing to continue to work and, you know, and try to be successful to maintain ourselves. So I've found that some of the larger tier contractors have actually reached out and said, hey, you have manpower. Can you help me here? Can you help me there? And I've been able to sub myself out that way there until my projects pick back up and things of that nature there. So, I mean, from a contracting standpoint, I know we're competitors and we're going against each other, but in a time like this, we need to band together and help each other out as much as possible. That's what I've been finding has been going on in the industry.
And Ariane, you just recently released a study focusing on New Orleans and tradeswomen and other skilled workers on the opportunities that can arise out of a crisis such as COVID or hurricanes, and you know, how to boost diversity through that. Can you talk a little bit about that study?
Yeah, thank you. What we were trying to highlight, as I said, my institute, the Institute for Women's Policy Research, we are concerned with ensuring that women have economic security. And one of the reasons they don't is because too many of us work in low wage sectors that are now impacted, particularly by the pandemic. But the construction sector has also been hit, but not hit as badly, and is expected to come back pretty strongly, particularly if there are investments in infrastructure, as we hope there will be. And as I said, there's the recruitment issue. So there are jobs, possible jobs open or will open that can take some of the people who now have to find new jobs and should in any case get access to better jobs. So women who lost their jobs in hospitality or in the service sector. And one of the big issues that Mary alluded to is, there's awareness among policymakers that something needs to change. And a lot of women don't see themselves in those occupations. So what we feel is that awareness now pushes policymakers to tell community colleges, to encourage employers, to work with schools, to get more outreach, to say, okay, these are possible careers for women. Because what I thought was really interesting, I talked to one young woman there who was a fifth-year apprentice electrician, but she said the biggest recruitment method for her, and she's recruited others to her local, is she goes after work into a supermarket dressed in her gear, and the women say, hey, what are you doing? And how can I get into that? Which is great that works, but really it shouldn't rely on word of mouth like that. So,
Mary, recruiting a more diverse workforce can often mean reaching out to people that have different needs as far as schedule. They might be caring for an extended family, or have requirements for flexible work hours because of kids or what have you. How can contractors still maintain their project schedules and profitability while drawing on this wider pool of workers that need that flexibility?
Well, this industry is, 6 a.m., 7 a.m. start time. So that does make it challenging for particularly single-headed households with children. And in Boston, we've just launched this Care That Works initiative, which is an initiative that is matching family daycare providers that are willing to provide early hour care with our tradesmen and women, so that they're willing to open up their childcare facility as early as 5 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. so that our tradespeople have that flexibility. And in fact, the first person that we placed in that program was an IBEW apprentice, single father, who had a 5-year-old and needed, before school care. So, that's certainly one option. In terms of the flexible schedules, we always hear that everybody has to be there at the same time. It's a teamwork industry. If somebody's late, comes in later, it throws the whole schedule off. And there have been examples of sites where contractors have provided flexible schedules. So I think it's at least worth looking at that, exploring that as a possibility and piloting it, because as we want to bring more women into this industry, we are going to have to look at how we, crush those barriers for their both entrance and retention in the industry. And again, that example of the IBEW apprentice was a male. So this affects everybody who is, dealing with childcare, especially during COVID. I mean, COVID has impacted women more than men, clearly. And I've heard many examples of women who have had to take time off from their job in the construction industry for childcare. They're homeschooling their children. So we have to make sure that we're not losing these women when they're able to get back, when kids are able to get back into school and women are able to get back to work. We have to make sure that the contractors are providing them an opportunity to get back in that work site.
Lamont or Jennifer, do you have anything to add from the field perspective? Any personal experiences with this?
I can say something about this. I
Sure.
think with that sounds really good with the whole getting the daycare to open up and maybe getting some kind of thing where you can have it, because a lot of people that, especially where I'm from in the Bay, they travel like 2 hours to get to where they're working. And so if you have to drop off your child, and you don't have family or friends that can help you and you've got to go to a daycare, then that daycare has to be open like at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning to get to work at 6 or 7. So, that's helping families, not just women, but it's helping everybody. If they could do something like that would be really good.
That's a great point. Lamont?
Yeah, from an owner's perspective, I mean, I'm pretty hands-on. I was a pre-apprentice, journeyman iron worker, general foreman. I've worked my way up through the ranks. And I think a lot of it has to do with knowing your staff and who you have and working within the dynamics while obtaining getting the goal done at the end of the day. If there's an opportunity for a set group of people to start at 7, then those set group of people can start at 7, whether it's 4 or whatever else it may be. But I really think it boils down to across the board communication amongst the apprentice, the foreman, all the way up to the owner, so we can get a grasp of what's going to work so I can please my client, so I can get the next job. So it's just a matter of me being able to look at the situation at hand and do what's best for all of us. Now, it's not always going to work out in favor for everybody. That's just the way it is sometimes. But let's try to at least be open-minded enough to say, okay, you 3 or 4 are going to be able to start at this time. You guys are going to start at this time, and just keep the project flowing. That's how I handle it. I'm very hands-on, and I talk and I listen to what people are saying. Hey, can we do this? Can we do that? And it generally works out for the most part. But it's not always going to be that way. But we, just be open-minded to it. That's how I govern it.
If I could just, from the research perspective, add something, and again, I think that is a great example, because what we know from workplaces which are successful in having alternative work schedules and flexibility is to involve the people who need the flexibility. Ask them to figure something out, right? Don't think you have to plan it all. Very often, they can see, okay, maybe we two can work together at this time and still get the work done. So I think in this industry, there's a lot to go in terms of creativity and, innovation in terms of work patterns. We're kind of a little stuck with saying everybody has to be there at the same time and then stay 12 hours type of thing, right? And I think there's scope for trying to see whether there are alternative ways of organizing things.
Well, and we have, so many more technology tools at our disposal now, both from remote collaboration tools like the one we're in right now, Zoom, but also, 4D scheduling on the job site, and, using different methods to make it a little easier to have variable work hours. So Mary, you alluded a minute ago to this, and I wanted to expand on it a little bit, comparing using incentives to boost diversity and inclusion versus, more punitive action. Is there a place for both strategies in this? And wanted to see if Mary or anybody else had any further thoughts on that.
Well, I think there is room for both, but here in Massachusetts, we really focus in on educating the construction community and the owner community rather than being punitive. Under our state laws and under our City of Boston ordinance, it's called a Boston Jobs Residency Policy. There are provisions to sanction, withhold payment, and so forth, but they're rarely implemented. And some activists are really pushing the city to do this, but our point of view has always been that it's better to educate and assist contractors with that technical assistance that will help them achieve the goal, because that's ultimately the end game, is to get the diversity and to work with the contractors. On the Encore Casino project that Lamont was on, Encore actually provided incentives. They provided awards to contractors that either were doing great from the very beginning or made a lot of improvement in terms of their workforce participation goals. And they sent them to Las Vegas, to their casino there. So I think that, Lamont, you may be familiar with that program. that might have provided some incentive for improvement on that particular project. And that project did meet and exceed its goals for both women and people of color. But part of that was that we have what's called an Access and Opportunity Committee. So that was a committee that met monthly. It was a public meeting. The Mass Gaming Commission was always present. The owner of the project was present, as well as community advocates, contractors, community-based organizations. And it was at those meetings. In the beginning, it was he said, she said, it was very contentious, but then it evolved to a place where, again, we were educating and sharing best practices about how to meet these goals. And that laid the groundwork for, finishing the job best practices and the other things that we're doing in Massachusetts to achieve workforce diversity and inclusivity.
Vicki, in the field, how do you get people to be that one guy without knocking heads together at the job site? What works?
I truly believe that 90 to 95% are really good guys. It's that 5 to 10% that we are allowing to have too much power on a job site. So what we have to do is educate our brothers that are already our allies to speak up. There's ways of doing it. You could distract. You could say, hey, how was that game last night? Or you can be direct and say, hey, knock it off. But I think what we're seeing is that we need allies to stand with us and by us. And I think that's probably the most important thing.
So Jennifer, I was wondering if you could expand on what Vicki was talking about earlier, the safety implications of harassment on the job site and all of the issues related to having a job site that is inclusive.
I can say, just like Vicki was saying earlier, the be that one guy that could help out. I mean, if somebody's being harassed or bullied, and that's going to be on their mind when they're trying to work, and it's going to be on everybody else's mind that was around it. And if your head's not in the game when you're trying to do your job, that's not safe. So, if the Be That One Guy is a really good program, because, if you say that you want them to stop doing whatever they're doing to make people uncomfortable, then other people should join in. And I know from experience that people do that, so the safety part of it, if people didn't have those issues, then people could, more concentrate on their work.
Ariane, you had included in your report that project owners, whether they're public entities or private developers, are demanding that project teams and workforce working on their projects represents the diversity of their user groups and constituents. So I'm just curious, what role the owner and developer plays in pushing the industry forward.
Can I pass that question to Mary? I think Mary
Sure.
is probably best.
Scott, that's a great question. And I was just thinking about this as you were asking the question. In Massachusetts, in Boston, with the building trades, our developers are now coming to the building trades and saying, you got to give us diversity. I mean, they're requiring it. And what we've done recently is built certain provisions into our project labor agreements around mandatory diversity training on site. We have a provision now for ombud services. So that would be a third neutral party that would help a worker who is aggrieved of discrimination or harassment, bullying on the job. They would help them navigate the resources available to resolve that incident or situation. We're looking at access and opportunity committees on private projects now, not just they have been on the public projects, but now bringing them to private, particularly large scale projects. So again, the building trades, they are using this as a market share strategy because the developers are requiring it. They're asking for it. They're getting the community. If they want their community to support the projects through the, that permitting and development process, that's what they're looking for. And so it is working well for us. And I think it will, we have to take advantage of this moment that we're in and address racism and gender discrimination. And hopefully it's not just a moment, that this will be a culture change in the industry where we're creating better diversity, both in the supply and the demand and the retention areas. So I'm very hopeful. I've been working with the building trades for 35 years and I've never seen this much change over a short period of time. Although it's like safety. Safety was a culture change. When I started in this industry that long ago, and I focused on worker safety and health, we had a lot of progress to make, and we made that progress. And so I always analogize this, and it is a safety concern, as everybody has said on this panel, but I analogize it to safety. It's a cultural change. We have to change the hearts and minds. And if we can't change the hearts and minds, we at least have to change the behavior so that everybody feels welcomed on the job site. That's the bottom line. It has to be a respectful workplace for everybody.
Anyone have anything to add?
As a small or mid-sized contractor that I am, I just feel as though it's an importance. If you want to keep females on a job site, I ask some of my other contractors and I challenge them, how many female foremans do you have? How many minority foremans do you have? If you want diversity, I mean, me being an African-American male, sometimes you might feel comfortable talking to someone, quote unquote, of your own race, or they can understand what you're trying to say or relate. Same thing with women, things of that nature there. So sometimes it's just a matter of making sure you have an open line of communication and just be open-minded as to every walk of life. A lot of the women don't feel comfortable coming to a guy and asking us a simple question, but she may feel comfortable going to another female foreman and saying, how do you put this thing together? So you just have to just pair everybody up and we can possibly work all this out. I know in the beginning of my early career, I felt a little awkward talking to some people, and it was just because of the dynamics of he didn't know me and I didn't know him. And I spoke a little faster than he spoke. And, so sometimes you get labeled as you don't know what you're talking about. And it's not that I don't know what I'm talking about. We're just from different sides of the block. But if we come together, what I'm saying, we got the job done at the end of the day. So I just feel as though sometimes it's just a reflection of, women feel comfortable sometimes just going to another woman, or just like sometimes men feel like comfortable going talking with another man. So I think that can help out as well.
Can I just interject, Scott? Lamont made a point about going to a woman foreman or a person of color who is a foreman. And that's the other piece of work we have to do to make sure we're retaining a diverse workforce. And that is providing those leadership opportunities, both on the job site and within our unions, to make sure that women and people of color are well represented and have the same opportunities, the white men have had in this industry for forever. We have to not only, just open those opportunities up, but really nurture our membership so they can take advantage of them.
I just want to follow up, Mary, with me. I feel as though all that's going to be based on one's merit. Like whether you're a woman, it's just on your merit. As long as you can do the job, whether you're male or female, black, white, yellow, or green, with Anvil, you'll get that position based on your merit. So that's my approach. That's the way I look at it. And that's how I feel about it.
We've talked about some of the supports that people who have kids or caregiving responsibility need, such as childcare or paid leave. And some of the work that progressive employers and developers do is to be the voice for those type of policies towards the federal government and towards the local government, and saying, okay, we cannot do it all on our own. We know COVID has destroyed a lot of home-based daycare. Do something to support it, and make sure that the people who provide that have good wages, and then we can use that and we can retain our staff, right? So some of, childcare is genuinely complicated, and employers can do things around childcare, but it needs federal government, public sector, it needs other supports. And having the construction industry out there as a voice saying we need paid family leave, we need better childcare will also really help everybody. And it sends a message to say that it matters to the trades, right? It's also good public relations, but it will also help change the industry and who can and cannot work in it.
So in order to know if you're meeting diversity and inclusion goals, as Lamont alluded to earlier with veterans, you have to know who you have that meets those goals. If I got a survey though from my employee asking if I was, say, part of the LGBTQ community, I might give me pause to answer that exactly, honestly. And I'm sure others have that experience from other groups. So how do you track the data, gather the data about your workforce without, appearing threatening, I guess?
I told you guys earlier in the beginning that I basically made an employee information worksheet, and that basically on that worksheet, you list your emergency contacts, and you turn it in when you turn in your W-4s to us. It's private, and it says a disclaimer on there that this isn't going to be used against you for a position or whatever else it may be, and also just getting a report back from some of the guys on the ground or some of the women on the ground and asking, what's this guy do? Is this called so-and-so's a veteran, or this person is that, the talk. You have to talk about it, talk about it. And like I said, we've just created a worksheet that is a very simple check off, yes, no, yes, no. And from there, we were able to put our numbers together.
Well, we've had an amazing collection of ideas and thoughts about diversity and inclusion. What is the most important message to leave our audience with? What call to action do you have for everyone listening?
Intentionality. This work is not going to be done unless you do it with intention. So that applies to the pipeline, and it applies to making sure that people are employed and retained in the industry on the end of that pipeline. It's not just going to happen. We have to do it with intention and really roll up our sleeves and do the work. That's what I would say.
And I would say that, we've looked at why diversity pays. And I think you've heard a lot of things today. And I think hearing from Lamont about how he not only met his goals, but exceeded his goals, diversity does pay. And we've got a whole lot of people that want to go to work for the ironworkers, and we've got to quit treating it like a country club and start letting some people in that doesn't look like us. If we recall our oath that we took when we became journeymen, about 2/3 of the way down, it says, I will at all times be respectful in word and action to every woman, and be considerate to the widow and orphan, the weak and defenseless, and that I will not knowingly wrong a member of this union or see one wronged if it's in my power to prevent the same. I want you to remember that oath, because I do. Every single day that I talk to our members, I remember the oath that I took. And with that, I want to thank everybody that's on this panel, and I appreciate having a voice today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vicki and Ariane, Mary, Lamont, Jennifer. Again, I can't thank you enough for all the incredible insights that you've given all of us and food for thought. So thank you.